time now for Back Pages Tonight right here on Sky Sports News, bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. Let's quickly run you through the back pages as we have them. So the front page of the Times sports section, Levy's shock Spurs exit. Of course, Daniel Levy, who'd been in charge as executive chairman at Tottenham Hotspur for almost 25 years, has now stepped down from his role. Big news out of North London, and it's reflected on the front page of the Telegraph sports section as well. As you can see here, Levy bites bullet at Tottenham. A picture there on the right of the Tottenham chairman, of course, oversaw over his time in charge 2 trophy wins, the first being the League Cup in 2008 and the second being the Europa League last season. Back page of the Eye looks like this. Levy out. And you can see there, it says, divisive Tottenham Hotspur chairman makes shock exit after 25 years in the job. And the picture there of Jofra Archer. And I tell you what, he gave it a good go towards the bottom of the innings for England. England come up short at Lord's. Archer's heroics with the bat not enough as South Africa clinch one-day series. So yes, England 2-0 down with 1 to play. And finally, the back page of the Star. Well, everyone going for pretty much the same headline. Levy out, Spurs chief steps down after 25 years at club. It's all change at Tottenham. OK. So this is Back Pages Tonight. We're going to obviously talk about Tottenham Hotspur and the news of their executive chairman, Daniel Levy, stepping down after almost 25 years in charge. Let's speak to writer and broadcaster Henry Winter about this story. I mean, the shock value is right there, isn't it? In terms of the timing and the news itself, how much of a surprise was it to you, Henry?
I mean, there's some very interesting pieces in the papers tonight. Matt Law in the Telegraph has gone into this, and this is the back page of the Times. But in the Telegraph, Matt Law's piece is sort of looking at the fact that the club have been having an ENIC, basically the overall owners, have been having a wide-ranging review of events and people behind the scenes at Tottenham Hotspur. So, I mean, if you read that piece, it's possibly less of a shock. If you listen to what's clearly some of the briefing tonight, that there's actually, they feel they want basically more entertainment and more trophies, and this is a new era, as ENIC are effectively calling it, then I guess those two elements collide. But I think if you're a Tottenham Hotspur fan, I think some of them will be sad to see him go when they look at the stadium, probably the best stadium in the country, probably one of the best in Europe. If you look at the training ground, definitely in the top 3 in the Premier League, one of the best in Europe. Obviously, they've got a fantastic new manager in Thomas Frank. They won the Europa League. They're back in the Champions League. But then, you know, in his statement, or the joint statement, Levy talks about Tottenham Hotspur being a global heavyweight. I don't think you can say they've become a global heavyweight under his tenure over the last, 24 years. Tottenham Hotspur historically are a famous club. You think of the trophies they've won. You think of the managers who've managed them, Bill Nick, the players who've played for them, Glenn Hoddle, Gascoigne, players like that. You know, this is a very famous club, and they won trophies during those periods. But in terms of recently, they won 2 trophies under Daniel Levy in 24 years, 16, 17 managers, I think it is. You know, that's simply not good enough, particularly when you're getting paid the wages that Daniel Levy has done. I think it's about 3.5 million in the last account, 6.7 in the previous accounts. And what are they actually delivering? Because clubs, you know, it's all very well having the best stadium in the world, but it's about flesh and blood. It's about human beings more than bricks and mortar. And there is a disconnect with the fans. And I think whoever comes in, maybe long term, I mean, obviously they've got Vinay Venkatesham, who was at Arsenal. He is a very personable individual, the chief executive. Peter Charrington will need to be as well. You've got to communicate with fans. It's their club as much as yours. Just because you've got the shareholding, they've got the emotional shareholding. These fans will turn up week in, week out, you know, in the bad times, and, you know, for quite expensive prices. So, you know, they've got to open up a little bit more to the fans, possibly loosen elements of the wage structure while keeping in with PSR. I mean, I spent a year with Michael Carrick helping him write his book. I mean, he didn't need any help. I just put the kettle on and press record. But he was talking about one of the reasons why he left Tottenham in 2006 was because he felt he wanted a fairer deal financially, wages-wise, because he hadn't actually moved for that much in terms of an increase in wages from West Ham to Tottenham. And he wanted that reflected in his growing stature at the club. So, yeah, they've got to look at things like that. And the final thing, really, is that they've got to remember they're a football club. The board have to remember they're a football club. You know, it's all very well having Beyoncé there. It's all very well having Guns N' Roses there and whichever American football team's in town, Jackson or whoever. But, you know, as the fans sing, you know, Beyoncé, can you play left back? You know, Guns N' Roses, can you play up front? I mean, you know, they wanted the squad strengthened. And then I guess the last thing you can say on it is I would love to know what Mauricio Pochettino is thinking tonight, because 2019 Spurs got to the Champions League final and then they didn't, you know, they lost obviously, but they didn't really kick on in terms of investing in the team. So, yeah, a myriad reasons, long-term and short-term.
Listen, that's an excellent overview, Henry, of all the kind of factors that ultimately have led to this decision. But what about the way that this decision was made? Let's look again the inside pages of the Telegraph, your former paper, and this headline: Spurs' long-standing hatchet man knifed in succession style move. Is that the tone that you also see it as? What's your take on it, Henry?
I mean, hatchet man is quite strong. I mean, I've had my run-ins with Daniel Levy, as most journalists have. I remember he was sitting behind the press box in I think they were playing a non-league team, and he just looked horrified to be so near, you know, the sort of Fleet Street's finest, or less finest in my case. So, yeah, hatchet man is slightly strong. You know, we've got to remember in all this that there is a human being there with Daniel Levy, and he is a Spurs fan. And, you know, he knows he is passionate about the club. I don't think anyone can doubt that. Plus, also, you've got to remember that the real innocents in all this are the family. You know, if his family's turning up to game and seeing dad, husband getting slaughtered by Spurs fans, then, you know, that can't be easy. But, you know, he made such tactical mistakes in terms of the disconnect with the fans. You know, if you want to talk to the fans, they're not difficult to get hold of. You know, you don't have to go to the Cambridge Union and stand up there on a nice table and just sort of, you know, talk from afar. Go and talk to them. And this is a lesson for a lot of owners. Ironically, on the day, the independent football regulator is flexing its talons towards owners. So, yeah, communicate.
Let's have a look at the back page of the Eye and the way that they have described and taken on this story. So, again, I'll highlight that word. Divisive. Tottenham Hotspur chairman makes shock exit after 25 years in the job. In Catherine Lucas's piece, Levy out, of course, the headline that many of the papers have gone with. I wonder, here's the thing. When you look at, you know, him inside the boardroom as a negotiator, when he's face-to-face with his opposite numbers, in, you know, the likes of Real Madrid for Gareth Bale or, you know, City for Harry Kane, ultimately he went to Bayern. He was known as this really tough, no-nonsense negotiator, Henry. But was that also at times his Achilles heel? Because Spurs often missed out on big targets, didn't they? And they rarely managed to achieve agreement with fellow big clubs, really properly big clubs at the highest level, because it was, you know, some people just did not want to enter into that negotiation with Daniel Levy.
I mean, it's a really good point. I mean, in the Michael Carrick deal, when Manchester United came in, I mean, Arsenal initially were interested in him. That would have been quite a move across North London. Michael wouldn't countenance that out of respect to Tottenham and Spurs fans. But when Manchester United came in, I think, you know, David Gill, himself a skilled negotiator, the then chief executive at Manchester United, you know, he went in, and I think, you know, some of the initial offers were around 12 million. And then phone call after phone call, Daniel Levy sort of inched it up to, I think it was 18.6 million, which was a considerable figure for Michael Carrick. And, you know, there's a little bit of doubt on both sides. But that shows Daniel Levy's negotiating skills. He played hard ball. And I guess that is his job. That was his job, was to get maximum revenue for his club. But there are two issues there. First, was the money that then came in, it was a little bit too late for Martin Jol to go and find a replacement for Michael Carrick, because the negotiations had taken so long. I mean, Michael was on the beach in Cannes, and he had to sort of leave his wife Lisa and said, "I've just got to go and ring Daniel Levy for, I think, the only time in his Tottenham stay, and just say, look, please be reasonable and negotiate." So, because everyone accepts that Michael had to move on at that point. So, and again, I guess with other clubs as well, they looked at it and went, well, negotiating with Daniel isn't that easy. And then, of course, you've got that element. I mean, he's trying to get the highest fee. And the players were thinking, oh, well, are we going to get good wages when we go to Tottenham? Because you then looked at the executive and Levy himself, and you think, well, he's getting well paid. Is that necessarily reflected percentage-wise compared to other clubs, other chief executives, in what they were receiving? So, yeah, they were issues. But I don't think you can complain too much about him wanting to get top dollar for Tottenham players when they were leaving. Plus, also the flip side then is how you invest it. The famous Gareth Bale. They didn't get quite the talent that they wanted in for the huge sum they got for Gareth Bale. Maybe he was too involved on the football side. I mean, experts within the club would be able to know whether that was true.
But before we move on to sort of where we're set for the future, just briefly, if you can, Henry, he was also involved in European Super League. He was also involved in ultimately trying to take Spurs away from Tottenham and potentially to the London Stadium. Do you think that will also ultimately taint his legacy more?
Well, I think he had the right view on the London Stadium. And if I remember it correctly, he actually wanted to knock it down and turn it into a football ground. I think West Ham fans might sort of nod in approval about that perspective. I mean, I think it was what he then did at White Hart Lane was one of the most complicated property deals, not even sporting deals, property deals in London's history. And he sort of put it all together in some big jigsaw, and they've got this amazing stadium now. It is a fantastic stadium. They're going to try and build a hotel there, and there are other little things there that he's done. They've got an academy there which helps local kids get into good universities. So I think absolutely we can describe and we can deride elements of Daniel Levy's reign at Tottenham Hotspur, and I've certainly done that down the years. But he has done one or two good things, and we should remember that.
Yes, absolutely. It is a nuanced picture, isn't it? And I wonder, how significant is this development? How are Spurs set now in terms of the future, how the club is run, and ultimately, could this pave the way for a takeover, Henry?
Well, it's interesting because the briefings tonight, as I read them from afar, is that the Lewis family are still very committed. I mean, that might still be pushing the price up. I don't know. On the surface, it looks like a classic case of fattening the club up for market. They're in a good place with a good manager. They've got obviously got into the Champions League. They've finally got a trophy. So you would assume, and there will be people who want to buy Tottenham Hotspur for whatever it is, 2.5, 3 billion upwards, because it's a London club, because it's got the stadium built. I mean, you look at sort of the machinations at Manchester United and Chelsea over sort of strengthening the squad, and then they've got to rebuild or build new stadiums as well. Tottenham Hotspur are far down that road, so they are an attractive proposition.
Thank you for that, Henry. We've now got James Ollie with us. Suffered a few little technical issues, but so we've sorted all those out. James, welcome to the show. Let's move on to another story, shall we? So this on the back page of The Star, and we know all of the drama surrounding Marc Guehi on, off, ultimately off in his move from Crystal Palace to Liverpool. But now, of course, come January, he can start negotiating with clubs abroad, and it looks like Bayern Munich want to get into pole position here.
Yeah, and it's no surprise, really. I mean, he's a top-class player. He's probably going to go to the World Cup next summer with England, and of course he will be free to negotiate directly with foreign clubs from January. And look, I mean, you have to have a lot of sympathy with Marc Guehi, really. He's done everything right. This summer he made it very clear to the club last summer, in fact, that he wasn't going to sign a new contract, but he stayed committed. He never refused to train, never refused to play. He never sort of went down the Alexander Isak route with it all. But he's been left in this really sort of invidious position where he thought he was moving clubs. He clearly had his head turned by Liverpool and felt as though his future lay elsewhere from Selhurst Park, and now he's got to sort of knuckle down and try and commit himself for the next 3-4 months and then pick up that conversation about his future again in January. And I'm sure Bayern Munich will be one of many clubs who will test Palace, who I think will probably want to get a fee for him. I think Steve Parish made that clear early in the summer that because the player wasn't going to sign a new contract, they couldn't really afford to lose him for nothing. So I would suspect that he will probably go somewhere in January for obviously what will be a smaller fee than they would have got last month.
OK. Thank you, James. Plenty more from you, more from Henry as well. We'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll look at more of the sports stories in the morning's newspapers, including this in the Telegraph. Rory blasts lack of common sense in slow play fury. We're back in a couple of minutes. To James Ollie and to Henry Winter. James, we didn't get a chance to really chat to you about the Daniel Levy news, obviously stepping down as executive chairman. Back page of the Star is quite simply this: all change at Tottenham. Levy out, Spurs chief steps down after 25 years at the club. Just your take on the situation. What's the most sort of significant thing, do you feel, about this story?
Well, I think we always felt that Daniel Levy would determine the timing of his own departure, and that is not what has happened here. He has been pushed out. Let's make no mistake about that. This is a consequence of a breakdown in his relationship with the owner, Joe Lewis, and there's a number of reasons for that. I'm sure Henry's been over a lot of them. One of them, of course, is the on-field performance and the fact that the fans have been so frustrated that they've protested for years about what they see as a lack of ambition in the transfer market in particular. But I think there's also, the elephant in the room here is the takeover talk in the background. And, Daniel Levy's been part of those conversations, which have been going on for several months, but they've slowed. And I think that there's a sort of a school of thought there that Daniel Levy is partly responsible for that. And clearly there's been a lot of change at the hierarchical level of the club. Vinay Venkatesham's come in as the new CEO. They've lost Scott Munn, who is responsible for a lot of the marketing. Donna Maria Cullen, another long-time board member, and significantly a Daniel Levy acolyte, has also gone. So you can sort of see that the sands of power are sort of shifting there, and they're trying to realign themselves, I think, now, ENIC. I don't believe there's a takeover imminent. I think it's more about ENIC now trying to move on beyond the Levy era, if you like, show a little bit more ambition in the market, perhaps invest a little bit more in wages. We all know that Daniel Levy was very, very tightly controlling that wage budget, and that did lead to some frustration and, let's be honest, a turnover of players at the top end. You think about some of the key players, Harry Kane most obviously, who left the club. It was simply a case that players could get bigger wages elsewhere, and I think we're going to see a bit of an escalation in that in the next sort of year or two from Tottenham. So I think the shock has just come, as I say, from the fact that Daniel Levy has been pushed out rather than having his big farewell, as I think everybody always thought he would, given he's been there for 24 years.
OK, thank you for that. Listen, we're going to try and rattle through a few stories a little bit more quick-fire, gents. So in that same paper, Elliot Anderson revealing that he walked out on a Scotland camp because the pool of representing England was too strong. Henry, how much of a blow this to Scotland for a very, very talented young player?
Very talented, who I hope starts at 6 for England at Villa Park against Andorra on Saturday. He's an outstanding player. He's the type of player that England have been crying out for in terms of, that ability. He can play as an 8 as well. But if Tuchel wants to sort of play Declan Rice a bit more sort of attacking rather than holding midfield, then Elliot Anderson can definitely play that role. In terms of it's a blow for Scotland. I think it was his maternal grandfather on that side. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of movement between countries, and he was, he's very much embedded. Whitley Bay boy, Wallsend Boys Club should become the 6th member of Wallsend Boys clubs to go on and be capped by the England seniors. So he was very much in the English system. So yeah, I don't think that the Scots can be too upset.
From Scotland to Wales, who beat Kazakhstan 1-0 away from home, with Kiefer Moore scoring the winner. How impressed have you been by Craig Bellamy in this tenure so far, James?
Yeah, I think this result was really just about the points, wasn't it? I mean, I've heard him sort of talking very openly and frankly after the game about how they had, one training session. They gave the players, I think, Monday off because a lot of them were involved in transfer deadline day. So, they joined up sort of later than they would have done otherwise. They then had to deal with the 4-hour time difference, the long flight, and then, of course, an artificial pitch when they get there. So, look, I mean, you'd expect Wales, even whatever difficulties they're going through, to beat Kazakhstan. But I think the fact that they've had to come through all of that and have got that result, which has left them on course for the World Cup, is obviously a positive thing.
Let's have a look at the back page of the Star. Concert window a killer for Villa. And James, he's admitted that Villa have been killed by the transfer window. He couldn't barely watch deadline day unfold because he didn't want to see the squad being ripped apart. Obviously, had to sell Jacob Ramsey. They left it late with their business. It has been a really, really tough one for Villa, hasn't it, James?
Yeah, and you got the sense that they were scrambling right at the end, really, with the business that they did. You think about Victor Lindelof, Jadon Sancho, they're sort of taking punts on players who've had problems elsewhere. And, this comes back to the wider point, really, about PSR and whether what it actually does is protect the sort of traditional top six and, insulate them from anyone else trying to break into it. Aston Villa have done everything they could have really possibly tried to do in the last year, 18 months under Unai Emery, and with Monchi there, running the deal. To try and break through that barrier and establish themselves as a Champions League club. And I think they probably felt they got into the Champions League, they got sort of 2 feet in there, and then they're dragged out of it by issues off the field. And you can imagine how frustrating that is for that group of players who really felt they had a positive sense of momentum last season and have just felt that checked by circumstances beyond their control.
OK, let's move away from football and to the Telegraph and James Corrigan's piece. The headline here: McElroy blasts lack of common sense and slow play fury. And one line really jumps out of the piece for me, Henry. While the crusade against slow play is valiant and well overdue, this scenario was numbskulled. Tell us a little bit more about it.
Yeah, completely right. I mean, when you've got a player, Rory McIlroy, playing at a course like this, there is going to be, it's going to be Beatlemania. Everyone wants to see him. This should be a moment when everyone celebrates what a fantastic champion they've got in their midst. And that includes the fans who wanted to get close to him. There were so many people wanting to go and watch him, whether it was the media, all around. So the officials should have been a little bit more sensible. And they went all VAR on him and started sort of timing him. And then obviously, that distracted him. And I think he finished with 2 bogeys in the last 3 holes. So it's ridiculous. I mean, that is real sort of provincial pen pushers should be a little bit more enlightened when you've got a star like that in your midst, a crowd pleaser like that, everyone celebrating him. Just allow a little bit more time.
And cricket as well, to you, James. Burnt out, England failed to pay over a cracks course, losing the series against South Africa by that 5-run defeat at Lords. Just briefly from you, James, I mean, it does feel that fatigue is starting to set in here, and, especially with all the cricket going on, the 100, etc.
Yeah, I mean, South Africa had obviously come off a series win in Australia. They were primed and ready to go, and England were miles off it in the first game. They were a lot closer this time. But you just sort of feel with England, you're right, one aspect of it is burnout. The other is, of course, the Ashes. I know a lot of these players, are rotated out and they're not necessarily going to go on the tour. But you think of Jofra Archer, who was, key figure tonight with the bat and the ball. You just think, well, he's got to have one eye on November and the Ashes series, and that everything that England cricket has been doing the last 2 years is pointing towards that series.
It is. All right, we're going to leave it there. James, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for battling your tech issues and joining us. And also, Henry, thank you very much indeed for your insights, your company. If you missed any of the show, another chance to see Back Pages tonight, hour. As always, show available as a podcast. Just download Back Pages on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your pods. Join us again Friday night. Our guests will be Mark Ogden and Martin Ziegler. Well, plenty more to come on the huge breaking story of the day, which is that Executive Chairman Daniel Levy has stepped down from his role at Tottenham Hotspur. We're back in a couple of minutes.